Welcome to the TapRooT Podcast. Our topic today is going to be root cause analysis red flags. So these are going to be problems. When you see these in an investigation, it's a red flag for you as a investigator, as a lead, as a person that might be evaluating a root cause system. Look for these red flags. You're going to see a problem with the way they're doing the investigation. So I want to start this off with kind of a question. What are some red flags that when you see them, what's the first thing that comes to mind that there's a problem with the investigation?
You go first.
Probably the first one that I see is from our, again, I'm using our terminology, they seem to stop at the causal factor level. They never dig to human performance root causes. They stop at it's the guy's fault. The guy did this.
Yeah, they're stopping at human error.
Yeah, they stop at the error itself, and they never go any deeper than that. And that tells me right off that they're using. We're either just trying to do it from our own heads, or we're using a system that just doesn't dig that deep.
Yeah, I think the first and most obvious red flag is you ever see the phrase operator error or human error anywhere in an investigation as the report.
As the finding.
As a finding, yeah.
That's right.
That's a red flag immediately.
Yeah.
That's just saying, hey, they've stopped the investigation when they found someone made a mistake. And their corrective actions are going to reflect that every time. You're going to see the same thing, discipline, retraining. Going to add some more stuff to a procedure.
Now, I don't want anybody thinking that you don't have to identify where humans may have made an error. That's perfectly okay. I think we all recognize that humans make errors. And if you don't recognize those during your investigation, you're also going to be missing things. But if you stop at that point, that's where the problem comes up. That's the red flag that I see, is when you stop and at that discovery.
That's got to be the start of the investigation. Right. Tim, is there any red flags stick up in your mind right away?
Yeah, but I took a little different approach to this topic in that it's well documented. My background, I had to try to be predictive all the time. So as far as my red flags on a bad investigation, it's more of like proactive measures, like before you get to the point of the investigation being finalized and going back and saying, oh, we just stopped at the human error, so we didn't go deep enough, which I absolutely agree with.
Yep.
But what I always got more bang for my buck was looking at why the investigation was going before we even got to the end, so we weren't spinning our wheels. So that's a good look you just shot. Here's what I'm talking about. For example, because you said process, not just the investigation itself. Mm-hmm. And what jumped out at me immediately is when people try to do investigations based on just witness statements alone and don't go and actually investigate and talk to people and uncover stones and things. So
they think they have all the data, right?
We got the witness.
Just get the guy to write down what happened, and we can investigate from there. And that certainly does lead to what you said about the stopping at the human error, not digging deep enough, all those things.
So I think you guys both kind of hit on something with this, which is an early red flag is a sign that they lacked depth in their investigation, whether it was not collecting the evidence early on, or not going beyond a witness statement, or just stopping when you found someone made a mistake. My first one kind of ties in with that. The only evidence is about procedures. So one of my red flags that I say is if and this is even with it's a TapRooT investigation. You've got somebody, they built out their snap chart, but all the only conditions they have are just, this wasn't in the procedure, they didn't do that, the procedure says this. Like, if that's all I'm seeing on your snap chart is just information about procedures, you're missing opportunities and you're not digging deep enough. Yep. So
I would expand that to rules, like policies and things, because the moment you see Ken did not wear a purple shirt today, bam, Yep. And that's what they're focused on. So not just the procedures, but the rules they have.
Now, we're lucky with TapRooT because our process is going to force them to ask more questions and dig a little deeper. But I find if you're not collecting the evidence needed to actually look at things like human engineering or work direction or communications, if you're not really collecting evidence specifically for those, it's going to make it more difficult.
Yeah.
And so I find that a lot of my early coaching is about just getting as much information and really collecting the right evidence up front. That makes the root cause tree easier. So that fits in one of mine.
I want to throw one in that kind of feeds back to the first one about stopping at human error. I also want to expand that a little bit for equipment issues. A lot of equipment issues stop at the equipment broke, corrective action, fix the equipment. And even going through in-depth fault trees and whatever else that companies sometimes use, they sometimes actually do a good job of doing a fault tree. What could possibly have caused this? And they go through all these things, and then they find out, oh, we found it. They used the wrong lubricant, and they're done. They stop at the error that we used the wrong lubricant, and they don't dig any deeper than that. The corrective action is replace the bearing, put the right lubricant in this time, and they still don't dig deep enough and get to past the human error or the equipment failure, and they stop at that point. So I just want to throw that into it. It's very similar to the human error piece, but it's for equipment problems.
Yeah, and I think again, as a coach or as a person, one of our red flags we can look for is saying, hey, in this snap chart, in this evidence, have they just identified that the equipment broke and not gone a couple steps deeper, looking at what was the physical cause of failure, if there was a human performance issue, collecting that evidence related to procedures, human engineering, work direction, all these different things related to that human performance difficulty.
Yeah.
Tim, what's another one you have?
Well, again, talking about proactive versus reactive measures, but as far as a red flag for me that my investigation process is not good is when we set deadlines instead of milestones. When you have people in class and things, and they'll tell you well, regardless of what the incident is, we have to have the final report turned in X days.
7 days.
Or whatever. And that's a red flag to me. And again, it circles back to leading to stopping at just what the error was, or hey, the equipment broke, and stopping there because we don't have time to fully investigate this. It's that racing the clock culture again. So that's a red flag for me for the process is not good. And a way to correct that is instead of setting deadlines, it's set milestones.
I think that's great. I don't know if I've ever heard it phrased that way. I personally haven't. Because I don't have a problem with deadlines in general. I think if you don't put any kind of guardrails on it, it just never ends. Nobody ever finishes their investigation because there's no end point. But using the word milestone is the right answer. Not a hard and fast, you must be done by here, but hey, you need to have your initial snap chart built by tomorrow, or you have initial corrective actions developed and not necessarily approved yet, but developed by
some containment
Monday,
put in place. Yeah,
some kind of, you need something. But I like that word milestones. I think that's really good. Yeah,
and a good practice to do on that to change that culture, have people involved, like giving those reports to leadership. Hey, we got this investigation going. This is what we know, but we're still waiting. We got to talk to Alex about this thing. So this is where we are.
Yeah, leadership doesn't want a bad investigation. No. So when they put a milestone or a deadline on, I mean, I've told people, well, if management wants if your leadership team is asking you for an investigation report by Friday, you can tell them, well, I can either give you a crappy report on Friday or a really good one on Tuesday. Would Tuesday be okay? And of course they're going to say Tuesday is just fine.
I have found in my time that what management wants is they want to see that urgency, and they want to see that you're making progress. So again, when we teach the 3 pizza, that's part of that, which is the idea of we want to have that initial, and we want to communicate who's looking and working on what. And as long as you're communicating, this is the evidence I'm still collecting, this is who's responsible for collecting that evidence.
And this is my approximate timeline for that, right?
Yeah, this is what we know so far, and this is what we're working on.
Yep. Do you know this from, well, I would assume the Navy.
Yeah.
I don't know how much in depth we can go into what you did, but, there would come a time when, you had to have this done, and you would give those status reports to the captain.
You're almost making Ken sound like a Navy SEAL there for a second. We don't know what you did. I can't speak to what he did.
Well, he's never exactly told me, so I'm not going to. But the point I'm making is those status reports are important, and it keeps the team aligned, and it gets you out of that hurry up and get it done, and shifts that focus to more, let's get into this and figure it out, because I don't want it to, Mr. CEO or Captain, I don't want to go through paying for this again, or having this idea of what our company is, that branding image, things like that.
Yeah.
So
There's always deadlines, even in the Navy stuff. There's deadlines, but those status reports make sure that those deadlines make sense, and you have a path to get to that deadline, and that's where those status reports.
Having a plan to make progress is I think an important thing in there.
to pull us back out of foul territory, that thinking, or you can say pulled you off in left field, but thinking of it as setting milestones, not deadlines.
I like that thought. That's good.
Yeah. Just the and that again, you can kind of see this from as an investigator. You'll see they're waiting to do things. They're not taking action right now for moving an investigation forward, or they're just trying to get it closed out and they're not actually collecting evidence. So both of those happen. And again, having milestones, a great recommendation.
Yeah.
One of mine on here is that they only have one root cause.
That's a good one.
And in my experience, most investigations, it is rare to get one. Not that you have to have 100,
No.
but most causal factors can generally have one and two, maybe three things that you could do better. And it's very rare in my experience to find it just one. Now,
Even just one causal factor.
yeah, one causal factor, one root cause, because most causal factors you have an error and an opportunity to catch that error. And so you almost always have two causal factors, at least two, in any incident, and you'll generally have multiple things in your system that went wrong. Now, could you have one? Yeah, absolutely. I've seen it, but it's just very rare. So anytime I see it, that's when I always, as a coach, go back and say, hey, let's just take a look and see if there's any. What was your evidence to say no to this? In some cases, to really kind of pressure people to make sure they're being thorough.
Not missing anything. I usually tell students in class when I'm teaching, our companies are usually smart enough not to have single point failures, right? They have a problem, but usually a way to catch that problem, like you were mentioning. So when you have an incident, it's pretty rare that single point failure is sitting there. It's probably some opportunities to catch. We have other things in place, and our companies are smart enough not to operate with a whole bunch of single point failures. So it takes multiple problems to cause incidents.
Now, again, there are incidents where somebody trips on their own shoe on the stairs kind of thing. And those, when you find those, often I think it's really, instead of marking one root cause, it's maybe we shouldn't waste our time investigating certain things. Now, again, we still have to collect evidence.
Got to make sure there's nothing else. Right?
We have to understand that there wasn't, there's a leaking pipe dropping a bunch of water all over the stairs,
or loose stair tread sitting.
There's things that we have to check first. But if it was I tripped on my own shoe while walking down the stairs, well, maybe that's an example of not investigating that, not spending those resources there.
Yeah.
So you're opening up another can of worms, but I'll plug something here. We're getting into that, talking about what's the risk versus the what's the right way?
Consequence?
No, exactly. You talk to companies and they say, like, we invest every lost time injury, we have to do an investigation. And they don't focus on what was the risk involved. Like, if I accidentally hit the table and break the glass and get a shard of glass, and I got to go, Tim was out that day, that's a lost time injury. It's the shoelace going up the steps is what I'm saying. I see a lot of people spend a lot of time investigating that because the person may have, broke their arm and now they're out of work for a week, and that's a lost time injury, and we have to investigate that. And not looking at the, you'll have to help me here, but you know what I'm talking about, looking at the something more to learn.
Yeah, if there's something more to learn or not.
Yeah.
I would agree that if we're looking at people making mistakes and when to do it, you're still having to collect the evidence, even if it was a one-off. There's only one glass table, and we're not going to have any more glass tables. This one, we're not going to replace it with more glass.
Yeah.
So there's cases like that where it's like, well, we're not going to learn a lot from this. And again, this is a fake scenario. We probably would learn something from somebody smashing a glass table, but there is something here to look at. That's why we collect that evidence. So you're always going to be collecting evidence and doing the investigation part of it, but writing corrective actions, going through the root cause tree, defining things, that's where we may not waste time writing corrective actions and doing a lot of effort toward it. We still want to understand what happened.
Well, what I'm trying to say is not approaching these incidents from that way
Yeah.
of, okay, let's collect the information.
Is this worth learning for?
Is this something to continue on and worth learning more? And having that good decision point, no, this was a one-off. The guy's shoe came untied. He just stepped on it and fell.
Yep.
I think that deteriorates companies' investigation process when they say, nope, you got to investigate, got to do a full investigation on that. And so they start dedicating time to these things they're not going to learn more on. And it kind of makes them numb when
There is one.
they have something that it wasn't a lost time injury, but they did have more to learn, but they didn't investigate that because it didn't meet that criteria.
Yeah.
So that's a red flag for me. Again, you said the process. It's not having a good evaluation system of focusing on the risk or the potential consequence and focusing it on what the outcome was as deciding this is when we will investigate.
That's a good point.
On my next one, I have the investigation always points to others. So what I mean by that is I've seen investigations where the investigator's intention is to try to find anything else to blame other than getting any accountability to their organization or the things that they can control. So this happens more when you're involving contractors and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see the investigation is doing everything it can to point at
somebody else.
At somebody else.
Yep.
I think about our 5-day course. We've got the fish kill. There's the hose thing. Well, it's not our hose, and they get to play that little simulation of the supervisor. Oh, it's not our hose, and I'm sorry, their hose broke, kind of thing. You see those opportunities for bias in an investigation where people are just they're looking at how to shift blame and not how to understand what happened and look for those safeguards they can put in place.
Another way to look at that is they've already determined an outcome they're looking for, right? The outcome is it wasn't us. That was the outcome. So how do I get there? And when an investigation ends up at a blame kind of thing like that, that's also oftentimes the reason is because we've already determined it's not our fault. It must be somebody else. And our investigation is biased then to go look for those kind of problems.
Yep.
That's a
Yep.
big red flag. I call that not looking in the mirror. It's just my own dumb hillbilly.
Yeah.
Because I heard one time this guy gave a talk, and he talked about at the end of the day, you got to go look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, did I do everything I could today?
Yeah.
And you got to honestly answer yes or no, looking in the mirror at that guy in the mirror. And, people companies gloss over things that are bad in their system. You have a contractor go do something, they make a mistake. Well, did your company ever communicate with them, monitor them, things like that? I absolutely agree. It's a way they gloss over some of their problems of things they do have control over when they're searching for that. Get it off me. It was definitely XYZ contractor's fault, not mine.
Well, and you can see these things, again, I see this more and more right now as companies have really gone contractor heavy for all their high risk work. Is they're like, well, we'll have the contractor investigate their own incident that happened on our facility. And it's like, well, you've got some responsibility as you bring in these people to work in your site and control what they do. And then what you'll see is, well, they're like, you're right. And then they're going to go, oh, let's make 14 hours of training that they have to go to before they come on site. Or I saw one, it was like they had 40 hours of training, like videos they had to watch before the contractor came on site.
Yeah.
And it was like, there's no way they've absorbed any of that.
Right. They've watched, they've logged their time, but we haven't done anything. And that kind of leads me to the last red flag that I had is if your corrective actions end up at training and procedures all the time, if that is your outcome of your investigation, you're not looking deep enough. You're not looking hard enough. So whenever I see training procedures and go yell at somebody, those are pretty big red flags to me that this investigation just isn't deep enough. And that, whether that's TapRooT or not, TapRooT gives you the opportunity to get away from that much easier. But a lot of systems just drop you at training procedures and
we'll see that when people they mark training, but they don't actually look at the root causes,
Right.
and really say, okay, what about our training process do we need to change?
Right.
We'll see it there.
Watch 14 hours of videos. We
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
need to change that process.
Yeah, that's
right?
probably an understanding.
probably-
We really need to look at the method we did here.
Yeah.
So there's definitely those elements to it. I would say as well, we kind of coach people about where on the hierarchy they need to have at least one corrective action. We try to give them tools that help people be creative
Right.
when it comes to corrective actions, because the default is going to be, yes, we're going to add this to the procedure or create a procedure because we didn't have this rule, we didn't know this was going to happen. But that's kind of like a default. We need to get a less outside of the box.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good point. So, a nuclear trained Navy guy. I'm not saying procedures and training are bad things. Don't get me wrong on that. That's okay.
Ken Reed said, "Don't train or teach your people."
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that that's where you always end up, and nothing else. You're missing opportunities to fix things. So, don't stop training your people, and don't stop having good procedures. But that doesn't fix everything.
Yeah.
I've always kind of felt like when I see somebody with just training and procedures all the time, absolutely the safeguard hierarchy and getting outside the box and all that. But also, too, it's usually an indicator to me they're not looking at or doing any like generic cause analysis or systemic investigations. If they're focused on just this one incident. And part of that focus is, we'll have them retrain on walking up the steps, and they're just
3 points of contact.
exactly. And
if you'd
so
only been holding that handrail, right?
that's another red flag for me that I think a lot of people leave meat on the bone with is they get so focused on this one particular and don't look at their data and see. Training's a great example. Well, we had a problem. This training course. I'm going to paraphrase, but you said something about it's not just stop at training, it's what was missing from the training program, things like
What
that.
do we got to change?
Yeah. Then they stop at this
train 'em
aspect
again.
was missing for this reason.
For one training course.
What about my other ones? What are they missing?
Right.
And so
for those 40 hours of videos, am I going to wait for the guy? He didn't do proper working at heights stuff, but that was in the video we watched. Well, we have videos in here about working in trenches too. Do I need to fix that too, or should I just wait till somebody gets in a collapsed trench and then find out, our video sucked at that too? So
I think that's an indicator to you as a leader on twofold. You're always getting training and procedures. We're kind of being a little lazy, not getting up the safeguard hierarchy, not getting outside the box, but also too, to me, as a leader, it's an indicator we're not looking at, okay, here's what we've learned from this, and here's where else we're seeing it.
Yep.
Let's fix it now. So that's a red flag for me, too, from a little different take.
So I think we've got a pretty good list here that we've given people. If you really want to learn how to get away from the red flags and get focused on good quality of investigations, best resources to check out the links below and come to a TapRooT 2-day or 5-day course. We'd love to see you there, and we'll coach you through your next investigation. So thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you at the next TapRooT Podcast.